So, what I want to talk about today is ruffles and gathering on the serger. And I started off wanting to go in one direction, and then I decided that that wasn't the right direction to go in. I wanted to talk about when you couldn't use the ruffler foot. And so I decided what I'd do is I would actually do the ruffler foot first, and then next week I'm going to talk about other methods. Can anybody hear my dog barking? I've got sound cancelling headphones, so hopefully you can't. So I want to look at the different ways you can do it because it depends on what you want to do with your ruffle as to what method you should use. You know, if you have something, let's have a look at a few things. I have them all here. I have this little dress. This is cute. It's not actually finished. Isn't that sweet? That's the back, which is appropriate because it's for my granddaughter, Everly, and all you ever see is her back as she's running in the opposite direction. So it needs a bit more decoration. But do you see it has a ruffle around the bottom, a skirt perhaps? Now I have to do that differently. I can't use the ruffler foot for that, and that's what I'm going to cover next week. But there's a lot of times when I can. And other times I use the ruffler foot, perhaps or perhaps not, is with puffing. So having talked about the ruffler foot, you have to say to yourself then whether you're going to use the serger side of your machine to create your ruffle or whether you're going to use the chain side, cover and chain side. So I know not all of you have cover and chain, so bear with me while I just go through that first because it's easier to set my machine up for 8 threads before you come in rather than as we're doing a demo. Right. Like the designs of that dress. Yes, I'm thinking of doing it as a class, but I'll tell you more about that next week when we look at that pattern. Oh, here's another one that I've done ruffles on. So here's ruffles. And you know, the problem with these ruffles is they are continuous. Okay, so that creates another problem. So I actually, on this occasion, made my ruffles using my 8 threads on my serger and I'd made the ruffles separately and then I sewed them on. Okay, and that's what I'm actually going to do right now. So I'm also going to talk about the shearing foot, but not everybody has one. So we'll do a bit of a lot of things this afternoon. Right, what I want to do is turn you around to my machine and show you that I am using 8 threads. Now you always say to me, what can you use 8 threads for? Well, this is one case when you could. And what I'm going to do is I am going to make a ruffle and I'm going to sew it to a piece of fabric. Now that is actually what the ruffler foot does. It gathers and it attaches it to fabric. So that's pretty cool and pretty useful if you're doing something like bed linen, cushions, all sorts of things. Um, but we'll have a look and see what we've got. So I'm going to turn you around to the other machine where I'm going to put that in, and then I'm going to slide it over, and I'm going to make that the bigger one. Right. So here's my machine. I'm set up for triple cover stitch, and my 1 and 2 serger needle are also threaded, and I have this ruffler foot on. And if you look at the ruffler foot, it has an area underneath where you put the fabric that's going to be gathered. It has to be against the feed dogs. And then the flat piece of fabric that you don't actually want to gather goes in this mouth up here. So it makes it sometimes a bit of a, you have to be fairly coordinated to use it. So this, let me show you this. So here you are. I gathered the green, the patterned, and then I sewed the green to it. And you can see on the back that was with a 4 thread overlock. Okay, I'm now doing it with 8 threads, but I will do it with 4 in a minute. And here's the piece I did with, nope, it's not. Oh well, I'll find it in a minute. We're going to do it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So what I want to do is I just want to show you how I use this this foot, only I think I use it a bit differently to others, but there's a reason for it. So this is what I'm going to ruffle. Okay, doesn't matter whether you use how many threads you're using for this. This is how this foot works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my foot and I'm going to place the fabric all the way to the back so that it's up to the needles. Because with this foot, what you're going to do is you're going to keep that fabric in that little area there. If you look, there's a little notch cut out. And the most important thing about gathering is I am going to have my differential feed on 2. So what that's going to do is it's going to make my feed dogs go faster and gather my fabric. So just let me show you how I do it. Now, I'm going to literally hold this fabric up so that it's in that area. Otherwise, it will run you all over the place. Okay, and I'm just keeping it up there, but I'm not pulling on it. I'm dropping it into the machine. And you can see I'm getting gathers. Okay, so that is the secret to it. Keep it in that little notch there. Lift it, but don't pull it. If you pull it, you won't get any gathers. Okay, and it's dropping onto those feed dogs and it's creating gathers. Now, I want to attach it to a piece of fabric. So what I'm going to do first of all is what I have done, which is sew into the fabric and get it started. All that fabric needs to be on the feed dogs and gathering. I've got my needles down. I'm going to lift my foot. I'm going to slide in this piece of fabric I'm gathering it to. The right side of my gathering fabric is up, and the right side of my fabric I'm sewing it to is going to touch it. So right sides together. And I'm going to feed this piece in all the way up to the needles. Because if you don't, you'll find it runs away from you. So I'm going to use, whoops, I pulled it out. That was my mistake. You know how I love demoing. So sliding it right in and up to the needles. I'm going to put it down. I'm actually going to take a stitch to nail it so it doesn't give me any hassle. Right. So you'll see that I have both my fabrics held up. This fabric I'm going to keep into this area here, this top section. It's fed into the mouth area, and I'm going to keep both fabrics up to their notches or that notched out area. And the bottom one, you can see I've got a very loose hand. I'm just holding it up. And what that does is it stops it from putting it all over the place, because you will find with this, it snatches away at the fabric. But by holding it up and keeping it in those grooves, it behaves itself. The most important 2 things I can say about this is differential feed on 2 and don't pull on the fabric you're gathering. Okay, you can see that I have 3 straight stitches and a 4-thread overlock on the edge. It could have been a 3-thread, but I wanted to keep the 4-thread in there for threading reasons. And you will find that this raw edge is exactly 5/8 of an inch from the last needle stitch. Okay, so that's a 5/8 seam allowance, and it creates a really nice gather. And I've attached it to the fabric as well. Okay, do you see that? And on this side, you can see that I have my triple cover gathering stitches and my 4-thread overlock on the top. 4-thread overlock's a bit of an overkill. 3-thread overlock would have been just fine. Okay, so that is a stitch I often use to attach gathers because I like the gathers on triple cover better than I do on the serger. And I'm going to go on now and actually just do a ruffle on it. And again, you could do this with 3-thread overlock, but what is the advantage of doing it with 4-thread? Well, let me just show you. Or let me say it's the advantage of doing it with cover stitch. There's disadvantages. There's always advantages and disadvantages. So you see, I'm holding my fabric so that it's dropping into that loop, and it just helps to keep it straight. If I put it down, let's see what happens. Oh, it's still fairly straight. I just find it easier to keep it in the groove. Right. So the advantage of using the triple cover to do your gathering is you end up with a decent amount of fabric. If you make a ruffle and then decide to sew it to a dress or skirt or something, see how you have a nice ruffle? It's finished on the edge, and you could just perhaps go to your sewing machine and sew over the bottom layer, and that would be a nice finished ruffle. And the other thing I like about using cover stitch for gathering is that it stays as it is. You know, for puffing, I love it particularly. But you don't, when you do full thread overlock, the gathers can come undone and you can tighten them sometimes. But you have to understand you can't do that with triple cover stitch. So I wanted to show you that because I just think it makes such a nice ruffle. And there are 100 times when you just want a ruffle and then sew it on, not necessarily sew the fabric to it, but it does both. Okay, do I have any questions? Yes, nice fine tucks, and it is stable. That's a great way to describe it. The triple cover makes nice fine tucks that stay stable. So for something like my puffing on here, I just think it makes neater puffing. This is actually done with full thread overlock, but I think if I'd done it with puffing, you could see it would be a neater gather. Right. Does that foot work on the euphoria as well? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. But you can't finish the edge, but you can certainly use it to gather and attach on your euphoria. So let me just check. I haven't given you a slideshow this week. I kind of feel it's confusing sometimes, but I've got one just so I stay on track. So what I'm going to do now is I've shown you the triple cover, the 8 threads. Now we're just going to go down to the serger side of the machine. So I'm just going to pop those threads out. Do I need to show you anything else? No. Let me just check something. Also, you have the shearing foot. Okay, the shearing foot, you could use the shearing foot to make a ruffle on the euphoria. That, you know, but if you wanted to attach it, you would need to use, you're going to attach it to to a piece of ruffle to a piece of fabric with a ruffler foot. With the shearing foot, you're just going to gather a piece of fabric. Okay, that's the difference between the two. You can't use the shearing foot to attach it to fabric. Can the ruffler foot work on the acclaim? Yes, there is a ruffler foot for the acclaim. There is a ruffler foot for all machines. It's one of those, every machine's got one. Um, Diane says, how about shearing? If I'm going to do shearing, I'm going to use the shearing foot. Okay, so let me just show you this. This is where I have used the shearing foot with triple cover stitch, okay, triple cover stitch, and I put some ribbon in that slot at the front, I think. Yeah, no, I think at the back there. And what I did was I sewed the ribbon over the top of the gathers. Do you see that? So that's actually quite nice, and it gives a sort of sheared look. And on the back, you'll see it's just triple cover stitch, but I've sewn ribbon over the top. So, that's why they called it a shearing foot, because it does basically do this kind of shearing. And if I'm doing shearing, I would use that foot, even if I was using elastic cord. So yes, a little bit confusing. Not everybody has that foot. So let me just pop these threads out and then we're going to go on to 4 thread. Now, if I'm going to be doing gathering on the serger side of the machine, I'm going to use 4 thread overlock. You could use 3, but I think you get a better stitch. But also, why would I use 4? Well, because 4 thread overlock gives me 2 rows of straight stitch. Okay, which is what you get on a sewing machine. You get 2 threads of straight stitch, and you pull up on it. And you can pull up when you use the 4 thread overlock. You can't pull up with triple cover. Okay, so let me pop those needles out. Whoops. Ooh, we have big thunder. Right, just put them in my drawer. And I am now set up for 4 thread overlock, which is what we commonly use to create ruffles. So let's just make a ruffle and see where we go. And then we'll see what the difference is between the triple cover and the serger. So the fabric I'm going to gather is going on the bottom. I'm going to put it into that little nook there. I'm going to put it right up to the needles. Otherwise, it just runs away from you. And I'm just going to clear my stitch finger just so I can get up to the needle. And my raw edge is kissing the knife. Okay, so I'm holding it up and letting it drop in. I've got no tension on it, otherwise it won't gather. Okay, so if you get nervous and you pull on fabric, you won't get a good gather. And the only thing that's gathering it is my differential feed, okay, and the ruffler foot. So there's my gathers. And you can see they're not huge. I don't think they're quite as sweet as the ones on the cover stitch. I think they're a little finer. But it's still a gather. It's still a gather. Now, I did this on a 2. If I had put my stitch length, which they advise you to do up to 4, I could have pulled on the 2 needle threads, that's the 2 straight stitches, to pull that up tighter, which sometimes you need to do. So, you do have options. Hey, Donna, my friend Donna's on there. She's on holiday. Right. So what is let me now do it to a piece of fabric and we'll see what the difference is. Okay, so that goes first up to the needles. I'm going to take a few stitches so that I've nailed it, otherwise it will run away. Then I'm going to lift my foot, feed this fabric in right up to the needles, put it down. I'm going to take a stitch. Now they're both nailed with the needle, so they can't get away from me. So that makes life easier. So I'm just going to hold this one up into that notch and this one very lightly into this area down here. Whoops, I actually did that really badly, but that's okay. I can correct it. So you can see I did mess up that one a bit. See how I let it move? So I'll just do it again. It won't take a second. I can do better than that, honest. Let's try a different fabric. Right, so I'm just going to nail it right up to the needles. Right, going to take my fabric. Whoops. Right side up. It's your fault, Donna. Right, so I've nailed it. I'm now going to lift my foot and just feed this fabric up to it. Put it down, nail it. Right, I'm going to do a better job. We're going to concentrate harder. I think I'm getting to the age where I can't talk and do something at the same time. Right, that's better, but not perfect. I don't normally have a problem, but you know how it goes. So it's pretty enough. It's pretty enough, but it is a very short seam. So say I was making a ruffle to that I'm going to sew on, and I'll cover that a bit more a bit later in next week. But so I'm making a ruffle that I'm going to sew on, and the only thing I don't like about this is it doesn't give me a lot of seam allowance, which sometimes is fine and sometimes not. I like the more substantial of the other one. So there you go. It's finished the edge and it's gathered it. When I use let me see, where did I do it? You can see on this one that it gave me a bigger seam allowance and sets the ruffle a bit better, I think. But it's, whether you have that particular stitch and whether you want to use it. But this on a 4, and I can gather it up more to fit. So let me have a look at questions and then I'll check my notes and I'll see what I haven't told you. So let's go to that. Right. So let me have a look at the questions. Your fault, Donna. Yes. Hello from France. Wonderful. I like bigger seam allowance, like you said, more stable. I think so for certain things. This dress, I use the triple cover and it has nice big seam allowance, which I think is sometimes better, not always necessary though. If I'm sewing it between two fabrics, then it's not going to matter so much, is it? But I do think you have to think about those things with this ruffle. Oh, that was the ruffle I did. That was just a ruffle. It's just so much more stable. So let me have a look at my notes and see what I have missed out. I have missed out working on the shearing foot, so I'll explain the shearing foot in a second. So I've told you that the thing that gathers it is the differential on two. You can use a regular foot, you will still get gathers. But if you want to attach it to another piece of fabric, you need the ruffler foot. Can the ruffle be fed in folded in half so that there are no raw edges? No, because it's too thick. Okay, it won't gather. And that's actually one downside of this method of gathering on the serger is it's only going to work with very fine fabrics. It's not going to work with thicker fabrics, like perhaps some knits or where you've got a double ruffle. But you do have other options, okay? So don't worry about that. So the ruffler foot, the one other thing I want to say about the ruffler foot is when I use it to attach fabric, it matters to me that the stitches don't show, okay? When I pull it apart, I don't want to see big, ugly stitches. When you read in the instructions, it tells you to use a stitch length 4, but you could use it with a 2 and it doesn't affect the gathers, okay? But if I was making just a ruffle that I was going to attach to something, I might want to pull it up, in which case I would use the serger stitch and stitch length 4 so that it pulls up more easily. Okay. So I said it will not gather thicker fabrics. And somebody had a problem this week. So I just want to go back because I want to say this, that the ruffler foot will only work in the straight. Okay, it's just not designed to work on a tight curve or curves. Now, you can fight your way through it, but I think you're setting yourself up for failure. But don't let me stop you if you want to have a go, because I'm all for you having a go. So just let me put this picture back in. Oh, I just took it out so that I can show you exactly what I mean by that. Okay. So we're on the machine and you can see that we are feeding our strips in under here. Cut that. And actually it's going in straight. It's kissing the front of the knife and it's going back. And so in other words, you're not going to necessarily cut with this. I mean, you could, but I think it's harder to control when you do. So it's going in all the way up here. So say I'm working on a circle. Now this is a very small circle and it goes in straight up there, straight there. Can you see that by the time it gets up to the feed dogs, it will have completely turned a circle and be so far away from the stitching that it'll be very hard to attach. So let me say, if you're working on something circular or very curved, you're better off making your ruffle and then attaching it probably with your regular foot or perhaps your curved foot, just by keeping the raw edges together, kissing the knife. It's not going to work in the straight. Is this for wovens or knits? Well, it's some knits will gather if they're very, very fine, but some won't. So, you've got to try it out and see if it'll work for your knits. Most of the time, I prefer to do my knits another way, which I will show you next week. Um, but, you've got wovens that are too thick to do this as well. So, you just need to test your fabric. If it ruffles on a two, then great. If it doesn't ruffle very well, then you're probably not going to want to use that method with that fabric. Um, as I said to you earlier, it won't work on a continuous ruffle that goes round. Now, this isn't a ruffle, it's a skirt. But see how I've got a peplum on this t-shirt? So I needed to have all this fabric fit this top when I sewed it on. I can't use the ruffler foot for that because I don't know how much fabric the ruffler foot is going to use. So I have to choose another method. And the same with this. This is the back. Again, I had to get all that skirt into the bottom of this dress. And if I'd used the ruffler foot, I doubt it would have ruffled it very well because normally ruffles are quite big. Um, but I didn't use that method. This one has continuous ruffles. I made them using the triple cover and then I measured it to the skirt and then joined them and then sewed them on with the sewing machine on this one. So let's have a little talk about the shearing foot because the shearing foot is a good foot. I particularly like it with my cover stitch. Um, I'm just putting it on the machine with difficulty. It's a confusing foot because it looks just the same as the regular foot, but it says BLG on it. Now, not every machine has this. So people say to me, well, why is there a gathering foot? Why not just use a ruffler foot? Well, you can see this foot is a lot more, it's smaller, it's more manageable. Um, so therefore, it's easier to use in many respects. And the ruffler foot is for attaching a ruffle to a piece of fabric, but this is just for making a ruffle. So let's see how it does. So I'm just going to gather up this piece of fabric using the shearing foot, and I actually think it does a better job. I like the ruffles on this foot. Okay, I think they're a little bit smaller and neater, don't you? Now that's using quite a big stitch, and I don't plan to pull it up. So let me find another piece of fabric, possibly. I have loads of pieces of fabric. So I'm going to take my stitch size down because I don't intend to pull this up. And you will find even with a smaller stitch size, it gathers just as well. So quite a pretty gather. And I do love this, love the ruffler foot, and I love the shearing foot. This is the shearing foot. As I said, I did that ribbon design with that. I've done a lot of things with the shearing foot. It gathers a single piece of fabric. You don't have that big cumbersome foot. You can use it for triple cover. You can use it for serger stitches. Uh, I think we needed that foot. We needed something in between. Can 3 threads be done with the shearing foot? Yes, the shearing foot, and I often use the shearing foot with triple cover stitch. So, what table is on your machine? I thought we covered that. The cover on my machine is the brand new overlock table, and the advantage of it is that you can fit your long stitch guide onto it, and you can accurately sew quarter of an inch, half inch, 1 inch, whatever you want seams. So that is to me the favorite thing, but it does a host of other things too. It takes a lot of the attachments that go with cover and chain. So that kind of helps, but I'll just show you. Everybody always says to me, but I don't know how much to cut off. Well, with this one, you can attach this particular fabric guide and you can move your slot and you can get the exact seam you want. Okay, so pretty useful, and it has just come out. So yeah, going back to the shearing foot, I just want to cover what I said about it. It will gather fabric, but it will not attach fabric like the ruffler foot does. It's less cumbersome than the ruffler foot, and it works great for shearing, gathering a single strip of fabric, and attach a ribbon while gathering, as I did with the triple cover. Asking again, can 8 threads be done with this foot? Yes, both the shearing foot and the gathering foot can use 8 threads. Okay, so both can. Where can I find my baby lock cover pattern? You will find it on my website, www.debcallumstudio.com. It is up there, and it's for different sizes and things. So make sure that you get the one that you want. So let me put that up there, Deb Callum Studio. So do I have any questions? Any more questions? I'm not on questions. Let me go back to questions. What foot do you use to do the edges for puffing? Well, that's $1 million question. In that, if I'm going to attach it to I'm just trying to think what I used on my last one. I don't have all my samples here. I have to look at them sometimes to remind myself of what I used. But I think 9 times out of 10, if I'm doing puffing, my preference would be to use triple cover and the shearing foot. And the reason for that is it locks the stitch on, okay? And it gives me a bit of fabric to sew anything to. So I don't know if you remember my sheared dress that has a big puffing panel all the way around the hem. It's much easier to have more seam allowance on there. So I use triple cover, got the smaller, neater gathers, and I use the puffing foot, the shearing foot for that. How would I use elastic cord in my euphoria with the shearing foot? Um, you just put the elastic cord in your chain looper, okay? If you can avoid the actual tension guide on the chain looper, which I generally do, just let it roll from the floor. It still goes through. There is a bypass on your chain looper thing. I did a video on that, and I think it probably refers to it. So you may want to go back and watch that. In actual fact, I think it's on my group, Deb Callum Serger Sanity Projects, quite near the top. I think somebody brought it up the other day, but you certainly can. When you did the ribbon, did you sew the ribbon on your sewing machine? No, Jenny, I sewed it. Let me go back to my table. So when I did that panel with the ribbon, there it is. And what I did was I used differential feed on 2. I used triple cover stitch. I used my shearing foot that's on here. And if you look at the shearing foot, it just like our regular foot, it has a gap there. And I fed ribbon in. And so the ribbon was directly under the foot, and then the fabric was below it against the feed dogs gathering. So I did it all in all in one step. Okay, just sewed along, and that's what made these pleats. It's nice, isn't it? I I've never gone any further with it. It's one of those things I did and I had great ideas for, and then I kind of got busy. I need about 6 months just to experiment again. So 4 threads need 2 needles. Nancy likes my dress creation. It's a little bit different, isn't it? I was thinking of, it's a third done. It still needs the skirt. I'm struggling with it. I need to I've got to do something. The neckline never fits me well on that pattern, so I'm determined to make it fit properly this time. But I like the fabric, and I've had it for years, of course, and of course it's orange. So yeah, looking forward to getting that done. But on your shearing puffing example, the gathers are not on the edge of the fabric, gathers are in the middle of the fabric. Yes, well, that's the advantage of using triple cover. I don't have to have my lines of puffing on the edge. When you use triple cover, it's like a sewing machine. You can go anywhere you want. You can roll up the edge. You've got plenty of room, but you can roll up the edge and stitch it down there. Okay, because when you're using triple cover, doesn't have to be on the edge. It could be in the middle. So yeah, good question. Good question. So I just want to say that next week I'm traveling. I'm out Friday and I'm back Monday afternoon. So I'm not going to be able to do Monday evening because I'm always frazzled after I've been on a plane for hours. And so I'm going to do exactly the same time next Tuesday. And I like next Tuesday's class because we'll be talking about what can you do if you can't get the gathers you want, you know, can't do it using the ruffler foot or making ruffles on the machine. So I think that will really help a lot of you. Um, and I'm doing that next Tuesday, 3 o'clock, same time. And then we'll see after that. I'm out the next week. I'm out constantly now till November. So it's going to be a jumping around a bit. So let me just briefly tell you, just very briefly, Jackman's Fabrics this weekend, Somewhere Sewing Millersburg, Ohio, September the 25th to 26th. Sew Expo Punta Gorda, Florida, October 2nd to the 4th. That's actually really near my home. And Missy Billingsley will be there, Mike Johns, Pam Marshy, um, Amanda Murphy, and a host of other great educators. They're just the people I know the best. But it should be a great 3 days. So if you don't know about that, that's Flash and Sew Naples are organizing that. Then I'm at Miss D's Palatka, October the 13th to the 14th. Looking forward to that. Creative Sewing Geneva, October the 19th to 21st. Looking forward to that. And then so much more in Austin, Texas, 26th to 28th. And then I'm almost done, but I have one more barn sewing Cuyahoga Falls. Is that right? Ohio, November 9th, 10th, and 11th. And then I'm done for the year. And I'll get some online classes back up. So, anyway, thanks so much for coming in to see me. I hope I've given you food for thought. I think Ruffles is quite an interesting subject, and I think it's very easy to use the wrong method and have trouble, you know. So, hopefully, that will be helpful to you all. It's always good for me, and when I go back in and I examine things, and I have to I don't remember things, so I remind myself what these things do, and then that does get me going. I think, oh, I could do this, oh, I could do that. So hopefully it works for you too. Anyway, you have a great rest of the afternoon, and next Tuesday, same time, I will do the follow up to this. Okay. Yeah, she is scared of thunder. Okay. See you all soon. Thanks for coming in and keeping me company.